Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope y'all doing super well. So today we have another fun video. I wanted to talk about a movie that's scary but not full of jump scares because I just really needed a break from those. Today we're going to be talking about the movie The Menu. This movie came out in 2022 and it's considered a horror comedy. It was nominated for dozens of awards including some at the Golden Globes, and it even won a Critics' Choice Award for Best Actor. The movie stars one of my favorite actresses, Anya Taylor-Joy. I am obsessed with her. I think she's so beautiful, so talented. Like everything about her is just insanely perfect. So this really was just a movie that I couldn't miss out on. Also, Ralph Fiennes is in it and he is just absolutely brilliant. I just watched Conclave and he is such an amazing actor, just so good. Now this movie does keep us guessing a bit because it starts with Anya's character and her date getting on a boat to go to a very expensive restaurant. We don't know if the two of them are in a relationship or what stage of dating that they are in, and we don't really know why there's all this hype around this restaurant on an island. So we're figuring that part out with Anya's character. It's definitely like a slow burn movie in terms of the horror. Like things are maybe a bit weird and kind of mysterious, so it's not like an in-your-face horror, but I just really liked it. It wasn't boring at all. The entire time that I watched the movie, I was really entertained, and I just really recommend that you guys go watch the movie after this video. It's truly one of my favorite movies. Like I love watching it once a month. I love the set design. I mean, everything about it is just perfect. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Thank you all so much for being here and for supporting my channel. If you haven't watched my last video on the movie Trap, I highly encourage you guys to check it out after this video. That movie is so entertaining as well and just so funny, and the twists are so good, so that will be linked down below. Now, if you guys have already watched The Menu, then you know that a cheeseburger plays a big role in this movie, and I was tempted to go get a cheeseburger to eat throughout the video, but then I was like, you know what? I feel like it's hard to be like chewing and talking at the same time, so maybe at the end we will get a cheeseburger. I'm not sure yet. If I don't feel lazy to go get a cheeseburger, then we will get one to end the video on, but for now, I'm just going to enjoy a nice, yummy poppy. This is the lemon lime poppy. See if we can hear that pop. The best sound ever. I love these poppies. And I was like, you know what? Let's pretend I'm having like a little alcoholic drink with like my little fancy cocktail glass. So let's pour this out and then let's jump right into this movie. That's the good stuff. All right, you guys, cheers. Let me know what you guys are eating or drinking while watching this video. And yeah, stay tuned for the cheeseburger at the end because it's definitely going to be worth it. Okay, let's set the scene. The movie opens on a girl, Margot, who's in her 20s lighting a cigarette. Tyler, who's maybe in his late 20s, looks off into the distance, but when he hears the sound of the lighter, he turns to her. Babe, please don't smoke, it'll kill your palate. Then my palate will die happy, Margot says, being a little bit flirty. Now, Margot is wearing a leather jacket and seems to have a more edgy vibe to her. Tyler, on the other hand, is wearing a suit and is clearly more uptight and kind of like a food nerd. Like, you know, he seems more like a foodie. The two of them are standing at a dock and they must be waiting to get on a boat. Margot, tonight is huge, okay? The flavor profiles, it's all super delicate. When you smoke, you ruin your ability to be able to appreciate them. Oh, come on, Margot says, almost laughing. You know, clearly she doesn't take what Tyler is saying seriously. Please, please, he begs. It's clear he's being serious and this is something that's important to him. Fine, Jesus, Margot says as she puts out the cigarette. There's the sound of the boat horn as it pulls into the dock. Tyler excitedly turns. Oh, thank God. Wait. Is that gonna fit everyone? Margot asks as she sees the boat. Yeah, easily. 12 customers total. A night? How do they turn a profit? Margot asks. $12.50 a head, that's how. You're effing kidding, right? What are we eating, a Rolex? Come on, let's not ruin this by talking price, okay? Just go with the flow, let it be magical, says Tyler. Hey, it's your dime, Margot replies with a smile as she leans into Tyler and rests her head on his shoulder. So it's clear Margot isn't wealthy, you know, her shoes and her jacket doesn't really match with how put together Tyler is, but it seems like he has money. I mean, $12.50 per person for dinner is insane, but clearly to Tyler, it's not a big deal. We hear 3 other guests coming over to the boat. They all appear to be wealthy and a bit obnoxious. Tyler isn't really pleased with this like trio. He's kind of annoyed at them and whispers to Margot that they'll be wasted by the amuse, but he politely forces a smile to them as they approach him and say hi to them. Soren and Bryce seem like finance bros. You know, they're both adults but are clearly partiers and just kind of dumb. 2 other guests, an older wealthy couple named Anne and Richard, walk onto the dock. Margot sees them and quietly says fuck and stands behind Tyler to hide from them. It seems like she must know one of them. Maybe both. Tyler looks to see who else is arriving and his face drops in shock. Holy effing shit, Lillian Bloom, he says as he sees Ted and Lillian, a middle-aged couple, approaching. They both look wealthy, stylish, and just like cool. Like they look like they're straight out of a magazine. Margot asks him like, who is Lillian Bloom? And Tyler explains that she's a food critic for Savor. Okay, it's official, tonight will be madness, he says to Margot, seeming genuinely happy. Margot politely smiles, clearly not sharing his love of fine dining experiences. All aboard for Hawthorne, the captain says. Everyone gets onto the boat, including the two new guests, Felicity, who seems to be the same age as Margot in her 20s, but she looks like she fits in more with this crowd. You know, she does look a little bit fancier and just a little bit more put together than Margot. And Felicity walks in with a man who's in his 40s or 50s, who's her boss. So he's never actually named in the movie. He's just referred to as movie star, but we'll just call him Tom for the sake of the movie. And Tom honestly looks the part of a movie star. He's wearing sunglasses, a leather jacket, a scarf, you know, just the whole thing. Margot actually recognizes Tom. Hey, aren't you supposed to be running interference for me, making sure people don't bother me? Tom asks Felicity. We both know you're not bothered by this, Felicity says. Tyler whispers to Margot that apparently Tom is a big foodie, or thinks he is. A server then comes up to them and gives them oysters. Margot reaches for it, but Tyler taps her hand to stop her and then takes a quick photo. You know, you gotta post it on Instagram first. Tyler explains the food and that it's made from a type of algae. Margot clearly has no understanding for this level of fine dining, and she's like, pond scum, delicious. They eat the oysters and Tyler is very happy, saying that it's just laughably good. Yeah, it's good. I think I just prefer the oysters though, says Margot. No, it's the balance of the products. You need the mouthful of the mignonette. Please don't say mouthfeel, Margot says. Too late, mouthfeel, Tyler says, smiling at her, and she just laughs back. So it seems like they're still getting along despite their differences, you know, despite the fact that Margot just seems more casual about this fine dining experience. She doesn't care about the presentation or the ambiance of the food. She just wants to eat, but Tyler, on the other hand, is very invested in this experience and just cares more about the story behind the food. The boat continues on its journey and they arrive at this small private island. They all get off the boat and Margot comments on how this is like the prom. And Tyler says that he never went to his because none of the cool girls, like Margot, said yes to him. Now, he doesn't seem bothered by this. It's more of a compliment to Margot, and she just kind of like cozies up to him and says, fuck those bitches, referring to the ones that rejected him in high school. A hostess named Elsa welcomes them all by name as they check in. Pause, time to take a sip of the poppy. Tyler and Margot approach the hostess. Welcome to Hawthorne, Mr. Letford and Miss Westervelt. There's an awkward moment. Sorry, she's not Miss Westervelt. She had a change of plans. This is Miss, Tyler says, and waits for Margot to say her last name, because it appears that he doesn't even know her last name. I'm Margot, she finally replies, not stating her last name. The hostess doesn't say anything for a moment. You know, there's some tension. Maybe she's upset that Tyler didn't update the restaurant with this change of guest, or who knows why the host is acting weird, but she finally says, okay, welcome, Margot, and they walk past her to get inside. Tyler apologizes, saying that was so awkward, but Margot assures him that it's fine, and she seems like really genuine when she tells him to not worry about it. Margot looks back as the boat pulls away from the island. All the guests are now standing on a small bridge, and the hostess, Elsa, leads them all to the restaurant. The guests chat as they walk in, taking in the beautiful design of the place. Bryce, one of the finance bros, asks the movie star, Tom, what he's working on now, and Tom thanks him for asking and tells his assistant Felicity, see, people still know me. Elsa tells all the guests that Hawthorne Island is comprised of 12 acres of forest and pasture. She tells them that in the sea that surrounds them, they're harvesting the scallops that they'll eat tonight. So the food is very, very fresh here. They see a small boat not too far out, and Tom yells to the man in the boat to harvest faster because they're starving. And everyone laughs at this like kind of cheesy joke. Lillian, the food critic, and her date kind of pretentiously talk about how they like the idea of this biome. Margot is clearly not into their vibe at all and says that they've reached Mount Bullshit. Like, you know, it seems like they're just very pretentious and are just like saying stuff that food critics say, but Tyler seems perfectly content. They all continue walking around the island looking at the small garden of produce. There's also a beehive that the restaurant has set up. Elsa shows them to the smokehouse, explaining that it's a Nordic tradition. They store meat inside of it and age it for 152 days. Elsa opens a door to the smokehouse and they see all of this meat hanging. They're allowed to go in, but Elsa asks them to not touch the protein. So what happens if you serve it on the 153rd day? Does all hell break loose, or what happens? Dave, one of the finance bros, asks. Well, I suppose the bacteria would introduce itself to the consumer's bloodstream and spread into their spinal membranes, after which point he or she would become incapacitated and shortly thereafter expire. So yeah, all hell would break loose, Elsa says. They all sort of laugh at her sarcastic response. Good thing we're pros, yes? Elsa says with a smile as they continue the tour. Elsa walks them through a room lined with single beds that's perfectly sterile looking. This is where we live, she explains. You actually live here, all of you? Bryce, one of the finance bros, asks. All of us. Except the chef, Elsa says. She explains that they're all family and that their day starts at 6 a.m. with 5 hours of prep work, saying that they do things such as harvest, ferment, slaughter, marinate, all those type of things. The last one being, we gel. Margot quietly asks Tyler, gel? Like, what does that mean? He goes to answer, but Elsa cuts him off and loudly says, we gel. Then she says that dinner is in 25 minutes and the workers' day ends after 2 a.m., so it's best that they all just live there. It just makes it easier. Someone asks if they ever get burned out or tired of doing this every single day, but Elsa says that the chef and the workers hold themselves to the highest standard, so they never burn anything unless by design to make delicious food. She then asks, now who's hungry? The group, still led by Elsa, walk towards the restaurant. Tyler notices another cottage and he asks who lives there, and Elsa tells him, the chef. Oh, well, can we see his house? He asks. Even we are not allowed inside Chef's cottage, Elsa says. Tyler still looks at it, intrigued by it, but then he continues to walk with the group. Now, the outside of the restaurant is modern and it's made from like stone, or maybe it's like some type of marble, and it's just like actually stunning. Like, this restaurant is beautiful. The door is made of long wood slats, and when it opens, it makes two openings. So one side of the door goes inside and the other goes outside. So it's just really keeping up with the very modern theme. The guests walk down a short hallway and into the dining room. There are just enough tables for all of them, plus one more table where an old woman who wasn't on the boat or on the tour with them sits in the corner of the dining room. Attached to the dining room is an open concept kitchen where a dozen or so of the chefs are hard at work. The other side of the dining room is just large windows showing a beautiful view of the water. The chefs meticulously work anyway, and it's clear that they're going for the utmost perfection. Margot walks into the dining room to find her seat, and Richard, the old wealthy man, is already sitting down. He looks at Margot and then tells his wife Anne to switch seats with him so that his back is facing Margot and he no longer has to look at her. Again, weird. Do they know each other? On the boat, Margot made it seem like she knew this couple. But how? Elsa shows Margot to her seat and pulls a chair out for her as the rest of the guests settle into their seats. All the people who came together are sitting at the table with each other, so they're not like sitting in one big communal table. Like, everyone has their own separate seats that are decently spread out. We can see that the restaurant is just really beautiful and modern inside. There's a fireplace built into the stone wall next to the windows. Everything just looks so fancy, like straight out of a magazine, but also minimalist. Margot picks up the name tag that was at her seat that reads Miss Westervelt, and she puts it to the side. Elsa asks them to not take photos per the chef's request, and Tyler puts his phone away. Come on, we can't miss this, Tyler says to Margot, and heads over to the kitchen. A little caught off guard, she follows him. Do you make that with a Paco Jet? Tyler asks one of the chefs. Exactly, sir, he answers. Tyler tells Margot that a Paco Jet can produce a powderized snow-like texture. She replies, cool, clearly not thinking it's that cool. The same chef then tells him, you really know your stuff, Mr. Ledford. Oh, you know my name? Oh, we live to know everyone who dines with us, he says, without even looking up at Tyler or at Margot. Tyler then asks him if the chef is around anywhere, but then the chef cuts him off and for the first time looks up at Tyler and says, why don't you take your seat? We're about to serve. Right, yeah, okay, thank you, Tyler replies, and then him and Margot return to their table. A server pours a glass of wine for the older woman who is still sitting alone in the corner. Who is this old woman? Why was she here before all of the guests? Now, Tyler's seat faces the kitchen, and he actually hushes Margot even though she wasn't even talking and whispers, there he is, as he points into the kitchen at the head chef who is talking to Elsa. The head chef then turns and looks into Tyler's direction. Fuck, is he looking at me? Tyler nervously says. Margot turns turns her back because her back is facing the kitchen, and she looks at the head chef who is still just staring in their direction. In the next scene, we see the tide on the shoreline, and there's text on the screen that says amuse-bouche. Inside the kitchen, the chefs are putting the finishing touches on the first course. It's small orange and green balls with a black chip and a white powder on top. The chefs bring the food out to the table, and this is when we get a closer look at the old woman who is sitting alone. She's wearing a casual outfit, and she isn't even sitting straight up. So this kind of just shows us that this really isn't her typical scene. Like, who is she? It doesn't seem like she's a guest here. The food is dropped off at the tables and explained by the servers. Here we have a compressed and pickled cucumber melon, milk snow, and shard lace. Enjoy. Lillian, the food critic, doesn't really look impressed by this. Oh, this ongoing obsession with snow, she quietly says to her friend Ted. It's officially a plague and no one is immune, he replies. Lillian takes a bite. Can you taste a little goat right at the end? She asks Ted. You know, she said this was made out of milk. I wonder. Yeah, she did say that, but she didn't say of what species. They continue to analyze the food as we go over to Felicity and the movie stars table. I want to hear your pitch for the show, but first, I would like to say thank you for this last 2 years this opportunity has been, Felicity says. However, Tom cuts her off before she can finish her sentence. The best of your life. Let's have many, many more, he says. I'm trying to do a goodbye toast. Can you please just let me do this? Felicity asks. So it seems like she's trying to tell him she's going to quit being his assistant, and he doesn't want to accept this. Felicity then gives Tom the company phone, the credit card, and his house keys, clearly turning everything over to him since she's quitting. At the three finance bros table, Bryce asks Soren, so how's Amanda? Are we doing this? The talking about our lives thing, he replies, half laughing. Well, we're close, why shouldn't we? Bryce replies. Dave joins in and says, well, do we have to? Not good, Bryce. Me and Amanda are not good. It's not good. Are you at fault? No, it was her fault she made me text her coworker. Yeah, fucking of course it's my fault, bro. I'm an asshole. Well, at least we have work and money, Bryce says as they all cheers. We're pathetic, aren't we? Dave asks. Again, they're just kind of dumb and egotistical men. Like, they're like laughing about cheating on their girlfriend, like talking about how at least they have work and money. So it just seems like these guys just have huge egos. We go back to Margot and Tyler's table. Jesus Christ, I want to live inside this thing, he says, talking about the food. So it's okay I'm not as into this as you are? Margot asks. It's good. I'm sitting here with the coolest girl here. Okay, so what is it with this food thing? She asks. I don't know. It's like, you know how people idolize, athletes and musicians and painters and stuff? Margot replies. Yeah, those people are idiots. What they do, it doesn't matter. They play with inflatable balls and ukuleles and shit. Chefs, they play with the raw materials of life itself and death itself, Tyler says. He goes on about all the shows he's watched multiple times about food, and he explains that it's art on the edge of the abyss, which is where God works too. Margot listens to him and thinks that that was beautifully put, and she says that she's starting to kind of get it a little bit. She's starting to realize, like, yeah, this is a really cool experience. We see the ocean again, and text on the screen that this time reads first course. We see the head chef who has a very intense look on his face. Another chef just nervously watches him. Okay, the head chef says. Yes, chef, the others say and nod. All the chefs again then put their final touches on the plate meticulously, using like little tweezers to put little tiny flowers on the plate. Again, everything is super, perfection here. Everything is super just like with meticulous movement. It's all just very detailed. The head chef then stands in front of all of them, looking out into the dining room, and then claps. And instantly all of the chefs stand straight up and face forward. Margot looks startled by this, like it's giving the military or something. Good evening, the head chef says. Everyone says a quiet hello back and good evening. Welcome to Hawthorne. I'm Julian Slowik. Now, Chef Julian is a cold man who never smiles. He's very serious and obviously dedicated to his work. So the other chefs go back to their plates as Chef Julian's speech continues to the guests. It will be my pleasure to feed you. Over the next few hours, you will ingest fat, salt, sugar, protein, bacteria, fungi, various plants and animals, and at times entire ecosystems. But I beg of you to do one thing. Just one. Do not eat. The movie star Tom looks confused. Is he serious? He doesn't want us to eat? He asks Felicity. Chef Julian goes on. Taste, savor, relish. Consider every morsel that you place inside your mouth. Be mindful, but do not eat. Our menu is too precious for that, and look around you. Here we are on this island. Accept all of this. The guests look around and Tyler really breathes it in. And forgive, Chef Julian says. And the old wealthy lady looks at her husband Richard, making it clear that she has something that she needs to forgive him for. And on that note, food, Chef Julian says, and steps to the side. The chefs bring their plates to the table. This course is called the island, and it's full of plants from the island, as well as rocks from the shore and filtered seawater. Chef Julian starts to explain the dish, and meanwhile, Tyler starts whispering something to Margot, but Chef Julian hears him kind of interrupting his big speech and says, "I'm sorry?" to Tyler. Tyler freezes and apologizes and then looks down at his plate completely embarrassed. "It's perfectly all right. Yes, those are the very same scallops you saw earlier," Chef Julian says. He also explains that the ingredients that they get from this island are in their most perfect state and that what happens in that dining room is meaningless compared to what happens outside in nature. Tyler just looks mesmerized listening to all of this. Chef Julian says, "Enjoy," and there are a few claps from the guests. "That's a cheery thought," Margot says as she looks at Tyler and sees that he's like wiping away tears from being so moved by the chef's speech. Tyler starts to take more photos on his phone with the camera, even with the sound going off, even though again the host said no pictures. "You know, the nicest restaurant in my hometown was," Margot starts to say, but Tyler cuts her off asking, "You don't think the chef is mad at me, right?" "You don't have to call him chef, Tyler. I'm pretty sure he doesn't even know about your existence," she replies. "I kind of want him to." "Like you?" Margot asks. "Yeah, kind of." "Tyler, you're the customer. You're paying him to serve you. It doesn't really matter if he likes you or not," Margot says, and then takes a bite of the food. A server comes over and offers them a bottle of wine to pair with their meal. At this point, I feel like Margot just like really isn't buying into the whole story, like the whole like elaborate idea and just careful thought that the chef put into creating these dishes. She just kind of finds it a bit over the top and a little bit extra. Meanwhile, at Lillian and Ted's table, Ted asks for her thoughts. "It's fairly great. There are moments." "Yep, there are moments," he agrees. They continue to analyze the food and its plating using words like thalassic and agreeing that we're eating the ocean. These two are definitely very elitist about their food, but I guess that is part of the job of being a food critic. Felicity asks the movie star Tom how his food is, and he's like, "Yeah, it's good." Felicity says that he needs to embellish, but Tom says it's just a travel food show. He then explains his pitch for the show to her, which isn't that impressive. He says things like, "We'll go to Italy, I'll eat cheese, and then go to South Africa and talk about how racism is not cool." Felicity doesn't seem happy with this pitch, saying, "That's what you're going to say to 3 streaming services on Monday? Jesus fucking Christ, this is a disaster." So it seems like Tom doesn't have much going for him at the moment. No new movies, no new shows. He's trying to create this like random food travel show, but even his assistant doesn't think it's a good idea. At the 3 finance boys table, one of them asks Bryce, "Do you like it?" "Yeah, the otter food?" "Yeah, it's solid," he replies. Soren says he had shellfish just as good at home with his chef Ricardo. "Whatever, at least we can say we've been here, right?" Bryce says. Clearly they don't care about the food either, they just care about telling people like, "Yeah, we went to this fancy place." Elsa, the host, slowly walks around listening in on this conversation. Meanwhile, Anne and Richard sit pretty quietly and engage in some very dry small talk about Anne running into their friend Perry. Richard asks how he was, and Anne replies with, "Well, you know, Perry." It just seems like this couple really has nothing to talk about. "I want plating in 5, Chef Julian yells. "Yes, chef," all the chefs answer in unison. As the sun sets over the ocean, the screen reads, "Second course." This time, the chefs use droppers to drop liquid onto these tiny holes in the plates. They also put some type of cream on the plate. Chef Julian claps loudly, causing Margot to jump again. "Is he going to keep doing that?" she asks Tyler, annoyed. Chef Julian starts another speech about how bread has existed in some form for over 12,000 years, especially among the poor. He goes on that the ingredients are simple, and even today, grain represents 65% of agriculture. He says that ancient Greek peasants dipped their stale bread in wine for breakfast. Tyler is like mouthing the words as Chef Julian speaks. He says it's food of the common man, but that they're not of the common man, so tonight the guests get no bread. A bell dings and the chefs carry out the next meal, which is just the sauces and no bread, but instead a paper with writing on it. All the guests start to make comments like, "Wait, there's no bread? Like, this place is known known for its bread. Why aren't we getting bread? And they're all just kind of annoyed at this. Like, they're thinking it's gotta be a bit. Like, there's no way we're just having sauces and no bread. Chef Julian says, please enjoy the unaccompanied accompaniments. The guests read the paper that says, the bread you will not be eating tonight was made from the heritage wheat called Red 5. All the tables react a little differently to the situation. The movie star Tom notes that the sauces are still good even without the bread. Ted, one of the food critics, seems a little bit excited, saying that this is like a little outrageous, isn't it? Lillian talks about it and Ted sucks up, agreeing with everything that she says about her and the chef's shared awareness of the history of class. Lillian puts on her glasses and looks at her plate and says that one of the sauces looks like it's split slightly. Ted agrees, saying that he noticed this as soon as it came out but that he didn't want to say anything. Chef Julian watches their conversation from the kitchen. Lillian says that you shouldn't really see this at a restaurant of this quality. Again, the food critics just sound very pretentious. Like, it also sounds like anything that Lillian says, Ted just agrees with just to kind of like keep her happy and make it seem like he also knows what he's talking about. At Tyler and Margot's table, Tyler explains how Chef Julian is a badass and that Tyler's trying to figure out what the overarching theme of this whole meal is, which they won't be able to figure out till the end. Wait, you like this? Margot replies. Uh-huh. Tyler says. He's basically insulting you, Margot says. You don't get it, it's a concept. I know what a concept is, Tyler. Trust me, he's telling a story. Tyler goes on to say that Chef Julian isn't just a chef, he's a storyteller who doesn't care about rules. Margot argues that maybe there are some rules you should care about, like giving people food at a restaurant. She's clearly upset at the fact that she wasn't given bread. Meanwhile, Lillian and Ted's conversation continues, with her saying that she actually makes her own bread, and she even makes her own yeast from apples. Ted is impressed by this. The hostess, Elsa, brings to their table a bowl of sauce and says, here is another broken emulsion, courtesy of the chef. The chef then nods to Lillian and she tenses up with anger. He clearly heard her criticizing the sauce and is now sarcastically trying to fix her critique. Elsa then goes over to the table of the three finance men and asks if everything is to their liking. Actually, no, thanks for asking. I mean, the food's great and we totally get all the conceptual stuff, but can we please get a little bit of bread? Bryce asks. No, Elsa says. Look, I didn't want to pull this card, but you know who we are, right? Bryce asks. Yes, Elsa says. You know we work with Doug Varick. Soren says. No, you work for Mr. Varick. Elsa replies. Exactly. So, you know, we all play on the same team. So just slip us a little bread, please, Dave says. The other two add that they won't tell anyone. Still, Elsa says no. They're all like, wow, like they cannot believe that they're getting rejected. Like they're truly insulted at the fact that they're being denied bread. Soren then just tells her, okay, that'll be all then. May I? Elsa asks. She goes over to Soren's lap and adjusts his napkin. You don't have to do that, okay? Soren says uncomfortably. After finishing with the napkin, Elsa goes to his ear and whispers, you will eat less than you desire and more than you deserve. Soren looks concerned and kind of confused as to why she told him this, but he doesn't say anything. Elsa then stands up again and says, it's a pleasure to serve you, to the table. So the finance bros were trying to use their status and connections to get some bread, but it didn't work. Chef Julian continues to just watch the guests. Tyler eats his sauces and asks if Margot is going to try hers, but she says no. He says, come on, it's great stuff. If you're not gonna eat it, then, and then he reaches over to the table and takes her plate. But when he does this, he accidentally knocks over a wine glass, which smashes loudly on the floor. Everyone takes notice, with one guest even loudly gasping. Tyler profusely apologizes as a server sweeps up the broken glass, and Chef Julian walks over to their table to just check on them. Chef Julian looks at Margot and says, you haven't touched your food. There is no food, she replies. This is food, he says. So, lots more to come. I won't fill up, she says. That won't be possible. I precisely designed the portions to account for that, so you won't fill up. Please, eat. A menu only makes sense if you eat. But you told us not to eat, she replies. That is not what I meant, madam, and you know it, he says, not really liking the challenge. Margot smiles and thanks him for his concern, but she says that she's capable of deciding when she'll eat and what. Chef Julian just walks away very tense. That was humiliating, Tyler whispers to Margot. Humiliating? Tyler, the guy's a prick. Don't do that, he says. Chef Julian then walks over to the old woman who is sitting alone as Tyler and Margot begin to argue. Chef Julian puts his head down against the older woman's. Clearly he knows her well. Again, this is the old woman who was already sitting there before everyone else. Lillian, the food critic, notices this and motions for Ted to look over as well. Others notice too. Like, why is the chef hugging this random woman? The woman doesn't say anything or really react, and then Chef Julian returns to the chef station saying, plating in 3. A burner goes on and the screen reads, third course. The chefs cook away and plate the food. The server pours Margot and Tyler a glass of red wine as he explains where it's from. Margot looks over at Anne and Richard's table again, the wealthy couple that she recognized. She's staring again. Where do you know her from? Anne says to Richard. We don't. Richard snaps. Well, she really does look like Claire. Why do you keep saying that she doesn't? You don't think so? Anne says. She's nothing like our Claire, Richard says. He seems upset by this conversation. Anne continues to talk about it, but Richard cuts her off and asks that they not obsess over her, so Anne stops talking. The movie star Tom and Felicity talk about where she'd be going to work, and it's clear he doesn't really want her to leave and go work somewhere else. Chef Julian claps and then starts another speech about the next course, which he calls memory. He tells a memory of his from when he was a child growing up in Waterloo. Tuesday was taco night. He says this lady here, pointing to the old woman who is sitting alone, is his mother. That's why he was hugging her earlier. He says, as you can see, she's rather drunk, which isn't unusual. The older woman just continues to sit there, not talking or doing anything. She actually doesn't look at all visibly drunk. She just looks like really tired. The guests kind of just laugh at this. Chef Julian goes on with his story that one night his father came home very drunk, which wasn't unusual either, and that his mother was angry and screamed at his father, and then his father wrapped a telephone cord around her neck. Chef Julian says that he screamed and begged him to stop, and that he wouldn't until he stabbed his dad in the thigh with kitchen scissors. In the kitchen, the chefs put little scissors into chicken thighs. Chef Julian says, I suppose I should have stabbed him in the throat that evening, but we're not so smart when we're young. He finishes his speech by saying that it was a very memorable taco night. The guests all murmur about this story as the chefs bring out the plate saying things like, was that a real story? Like, that was insane. They're all like, that was very theatrical, but that must be the backstory of what makes him a chef artist. As a plate is dropped in front of the movie star Tom, Chef Julian comes over and aggressively puts his hand on his shoulder. He explains that the food is chicken with tortillas, one of Hawthorne's signature dishes. He says that they actually change their menu constantly, but that this has been a staple since day one. He goes on to say that since we fear irrelevance and update to the classic, the images on the tortillas have been made using a laser engraving machine. It's the first time that we've used it. We hope this taco night invokes strong memories for us all. Enjoy. Everyone looks at the tortillas to see what they are engraved with. Lillian's are engraved with different restaurants that she has reviewed that have all closed. Chef Julian watches from the kitchen as the other chefs prepare the next course. Richard and Anne's tortillas say happy anniversary, and they're all pictures from different events. The first after Richard had melanoma removed from his forehead. Tyler's are photos of him from that same night taking pictures of the food. Like, literally, these photos of him were just taken. He hates me. I knew it. I didn't think he'd really mind. Should I go apologize? Tyler says. Tom's tortillas are photos of him from Call Dr. Sunshine, a movie that he did. Dumb part, bad script, fun shoot though, he says. Maybe it's a joke cause you're friends, right? Felicity asks. Yeah, you know, friends. I mean, do I have any friends? He replies, trying to kind of play it off. Soren picks up his tortilla, and it's writing that sort of looks like a receipt. Dave's also looks similar. Bryce's tortilla, however, is a wire transfer receipt. How did he get these? Dave asks. It's not good, Soren says. They all look at each other sketched out. Bryce calls over Elsa, the hostess. Can I help you, sir? She says. Yeah, what the hell are these? He says, sort of quietly. These are tortillas. Tortillas are delicious, Elsa replies. Yes, but what are these? Bryce says, pointing to the images. Those are tortillas, which contain Ecobright's tax records and documents showing how your company has created invoices with fake charges. The three men all shift in their seats. Okay, but how did you get these? Bryce says. Sorry, but Chef never reveals his recipes. Do you know how fucked you are? We'll have this place closed by morning. Do you understand? Soren says to Elsa. Oh, no, that won't be necessary. Enjoy, she says and walks away. Meanwhile, Anne inspects more of her tortilla images. She looks at one that's of two people sitting at dinner. And this is you and... Wait. Who is this woman? She asks, showing Richard the tortilla. He takes it and looks at it. How the hell should I know? It's fake. It's some sort of stupid joke. Was that a picture of Richard cheating on his wife? Back at the three men's table, Soren assures Bryce that it's a taco, that it can't hurt anyone. Yeah, a fucking taco that might hold up in court, Bryce says. Well, we have plausible deniability, and if they try and turn us in, Dave says and snaps his finger, making the others clue in. If they turn us in, they'd be turning Varric in, and they'd be just as fucked as we are, right? So we're fine, Soren says. They all shrug and agree. So it's clear that these three finance bros are doing something illegal at work, and it seems like who they work for either owns a restaurant or is like an investor at the restaurant that they're eating at. At Margot and Tyler's table, she tells him that they can't just take his photo and put it on a tortilla, but Tyler is just focused on wanting to make things right. I'll tell you how you can make it right. You send that shit back. Excuse me, she calls to a server. Tyler furiously snaps his fingers at her and tries stopping her. Did you just fucking snap at me? She asks. Do you know how long I've been trying to get a reservation here? No, and I don't really care. You do not send shit back to this kitchen, you child. And you thank them for letting you in the door, Tyler tells Margot quietly. What did you just call me? I called you a child because you're fucking acting like it, he says, tossing his utensil annoyed. Margot tells him to calmly apologize to her, saying that he can't talk to her that way. Actually, I can because ding dong, I'm the one who's paying, so maybe shut up and eat, Tyler says, and then takes a bite of his taco. Then he's like, oh, this is incredible, you should try it. But Margot gets up from the table and says, no thanks. I mean, this guy is crazy, like he's so mean. She walks down the hallway towards a silver door. Elsa asks if she can help, and Margot says that she's looking for the bathroom. Elsa points her in the right direction. Margot asks her what's behind the silver door, and all Elsa says is that it's something very special. Margot goes into the bathroom and goes into a stall. She stands on a toilet and opens a small window and lights a cigarette. Outside, she sees a worker walking in the distance with a pair of large angel wings. Margot then hears the front door to the bathroom open and she turns to see like who's coming in here. She starts to say, no, you can't, but she stops when she realizes that it's Chef Julian. He's in the woman's bathroom. I'd like to know specifically what it was about the last course that you did not enjoy. You've barely eaten the food. Why? I need to know why you don't eat, he asks. Why do you care? I take my work very seriously and you're not eating, and that wounds me. Margot slowly steps down off the toilet and comes out of the stall. She looks at Chef Julian. I guess I'm not very hungry, she says as she walks to the sink. I've told you who I am. I'm Julian Slowik, and I'm the chef here. Now, who are you? He asks, but she doesn't answer, so he asks again. Margot finishes washing her hands and says, I'm Margot Mills. So where are you from, Margot? I'm from Grand Island, Nebraska. Now does that make you feel better? Do you want my address for my mom's trailer park, you asshole? She says as she starts to storm out, like, why is this guy so focused on her? No, it's not who you want me to think you are. Who are you? He asks again. However, Margot storms over to him and says, I am Margot. You shouldn't be here tonight, he says. Please get the fuck out of my way, she says. They then just stare at each other for a moment and then he steps to the side as Margot exits the bathroom. It seems like the chef is just very focused on Margot and truly cares about her opinion on the food, or I don't know why he's just so kind of like focused on her. In the next scene, the chefs roll a large white sheet onto the ground in the dining room. The screen reads fourth course, and the chefs start to place plant leaves onto these sheets. Ted comments to Lillian how it's still very theatrical yet minimalistic, like a Japanese style he's familiar with. Margot is back at her table with Tyler and she watches the chefs. Meanwhile, Chef Julian is just staring at Margot before he claps. He tells the guests that he's excited because they're ready for the next course, but before he explains that, he's cut off by Soren, one of the finance bros, who stands up and says, excuse me, but what the hell is going on here? Chef Julian asks if he can finish politely, and without saying anything else, Soren agrees and sits down. Chef Julian then introduces them to his sous chef, Jeremy, who comes into the dining room, and all the guests clap. Jeremy created the next dish. It's called the mess. Chef Julian then talks about Jeremy's background and where he's from and where he studied for culinary school. His goal was to work at Hawthorne, so he wrote Julian a letter. Chef Julian goes on to say that Jeremy is talented and he's good, but he's not great and he never will be. He goes on that both of their lives are full of pressure and that Jeremy tries to be great. Jeremy, do you like this life that you dreamed of? No, chef, he answers. And do you want my life? Not my position, not my talent. My life. No, chef, he answers. Chef Julian nods. He steps in front of Jeremy and kisses him on both cheeks. Jeremy looks nervous. Chef Julian then walks across the dining room and says, ladies and gentlemen, your fourth course, sous chef Jeremy's The Mess. Tyler starts clapping, but Margot looks concerned. Suddenly, Jeremy puts a into his mouth and shoots himself. Blood spatters behind him onto a plastic cover protecting the kitchen. Everyone screams and either turns away or jumps to their feet, except for Chef Julien's mother, who just continues to sit there, just staring off. Jeremy now lays dead on the white sheet surrounded by garnishes. That was a shock. I didn't see that coming, Tyler says, kind of not panicked at all. He actually looks amused by this. The other guests continue to panic, but Chef Julien assures them that this is all part of the show and that this is what they're paying for. The other chefs cover Chef Jeremy and carry him into the kitchen. They then walk out with the next course for everyone. Lillian tries to calm everyone down, saying that this is just theater and that it's part of the menu. The plates dropped in front of them have beef and vegetables on them, as well as bone marrow. Eat, Chef Julien yells at them. All the guests jump up and they immediately start eating this. The chefs then start on the next course as the server comes around with wine. Richard, the old wealthy man, gets up and tells Anne to do the same. He tells Elsa, who stands in front of the hallway, and several guards that they're leaving. There is no boat to leave on. Then I'll call a helicopter, he says. That would be very difficult without phone service, Elsa replies. Anne is worried, but Richard assures her that he'll handle this. Elsa then asks, well, with which hand will you handle this? Left or right? Richard is confused, and Elsa asks if they should choose for him. Chef Julien then nods to her. Very well, left hand, ring finger, Elsa says to one of the guards. She walks away and Richard tries to push past the guards. They grab him and force his hand onto the table. The other guests just watch confused, but no one tries to intervene. A chef then comes out of the kitchen with a knife. Elsa, in a polite and calm voice, tells him to hold still, and then the chef brings the knife down and cuts off Richard's ring finger. He cries out in pain, and the other guests once again turn away and scream. Richard's wedding ring literally spins on the table, drops, and then Richard drops to the ground as well. Everyone is in silent panic mode, but Tyler just sits there eating his food, looking at all of this like it's normal. He's literally insane. Anne goes over to her husband, and Elsa asks if she needs help finding his finger. The servers then tell everyone else to sit back down, and Chef Julien says, it's all part of the menu. Everyone is still panicking, and Felicity looks at the movie star Tom. This can't be real. I can't do it. I can't do the hostage thing, he says. Then go talk to him because you know him, right? Felicity says. I made that up, he admits. Why? Because I'm a name-dropping whore, that's why, okay? He says. So it seems like he lied to Felicity and made it seem like him and Chef Julien were friends and that, like, he had the hookup, etc., but it was just a lie. Elsa then hands Anne Richard's ring as he lays on the floor and cries. Anne says, thank you. She looks completely in shock. Lillian then tells Ted, I honestly think this whole thing is just for our benefit. I mean, that's why he texted me, and this is incredible, right? She says, pointing to the food. Right, the acting is astonishing. Again, these two are just crazy. They're so pretentious. They think that this is part of the show. This is part of the experience and that they're doing this for them, the food critics. They don't realize that this is actually happening. Someone just died. The movie star Tom looks at them, looks at Lillian and Tom and says, what the fuck are you talking about? Clearly nobody else thinks that this is acting. Elsa then goes up to Margot and Tyler's table and tells Margot that the chef wants to see her in the kitchen. Tyler asks to come too, but Elsa says no, just Margot. Margot then goes into the kitchen and goes up to Chef Julien. No, I'm sorry, but you're all wrong, he says to her. Why are you doing this? She asks. You're just simply wrong. What are you talking about? She asks. He continues cooking as he asks, who are you? Margot. My name is Margot. I have served many Margots. You're not a Margot. No. What the fuck does it matter? She says. It matters because this menu is a guest list. This entire evening has been painstakingly planned, and you are not part of that plan, and it's spoiling everything. In order to proceed, I have to know where to seat you. With us or with them? He says, motioning to the dining room. And then you'll let me live? She asks. Let you live? No, of course not. Can't you see that would ruin the menu? We're all going to die tonight. Margot then just stares at him in quiet shock. Isn't that right? He asks the kitchen. Yes, chef, they answer in unison. Chef Julien asks her if she wants to die with those who give or with those who take. He picks up a timer and says he'll give her 15 minutes in between courses to decide. Then he tells her to return to her seat and that the next dish is exquisite. Margot goes back to her seat as she holds back tears. I mean, she's literally going to die tonight. Did he offer you a kitchen course? What was it, protein or veg? Tyler asks. Margot then just slaps him across the face and he doesn't even care. He just asks her again, protein or veg. He's crazy, like I said, and she just sits down in complete shock. Now, we see a clear teapot containing flowers filled with water and text on the screen that reads palette cleanser. The table of three men quietly discuss their options, of how they can escape, saying that the door is guarded. The movie star Tom quickly rushes over to their table and says, "Hey guys, we gotta do something. We can't be cowards. Look, this worked in a movie I did called The Assault. When they bring their knives and forks, we storm some of their kitchen, okay?" Soren then stands up and grabs his chair, saying, "Fuck it, I want to break this fucking window," as he runs over to this big window and hits it with the chair, but nothing happens. He tries again and again, but still nothing happens. He then puts the chair down and tries to kick the window, but still, nothing happens. Calmly, the chefs pick up the next course and begin to bring it out to the dining room. Elsa comes over to Soren and picks up his chair. "Please, let me help you get back to your table," she says, walking away with his chair. Chef Julian claps again, and he starts this course's speech, saying sometimes all you need is a good cup of tea, and that he learned that growing up. Margot shakes her head and just scoffs. Chef Julian goes on to say that teas are good for cleansing the palate and for facing hard truths. He asks if there are any questions about him or Hawthorne. Tyler raises his hand as he sips his tea. "Is this bergamot I'm getting, chef?" "Yes, it is," he replies, clearly disappointed in the question. Tom then stands up and asks, "I think I speak for everybody here when I say that we want to know." "Okay, why the fuck is this happening?" Soren asks, kind of just interrupting Tom, who clearly can't get the words out of his mouth. Chef Julian then tells him to think of themselves as ingredients in a tasting concept. He goes on saying, "But none of this should be a surprise to most of you. Miss Bloom, Lillian, if I may, my cherished early advocate, knows the damage she has done to many livelihoods." No, hang on, chef," she tries to say, but he stops her. Ted then speaks up and says, "Chef, you submitted to an interview with Lily Bloom, and that interview created you this restaurant. You enable her filth," Chef Julian tells Ted. He goes on to explain that he fed her ego by sending her a text invite inviting her to tonight's dinner, and that once she actually fed his ego. So it seems like at one point, Chef Julian appreciated Lillian's critique, it fed his ego. Her good criticism fed his ego. It helped the restaurant get famous. But now he's realizing like her critiques are causing people's livelihoods. Like she's closing down all of these restaurants, and her friend Ted just kind of adds to her filth. He feeds her filth. He feeds her ego by always agreeing to anything that she says. Now, meanwhile, Elsa tells Margot 10 minutes, referring to the time that she has left to decide who to sit with, and pleads that her husband needs to go to a hospital. He says he's fine and to just let his wife go. Chef Julian walks over to them and says, "My loyal customers, how many times have you eaten here in the last 5 years?" "I don't know, 6 or 7 times, I think," they respond. 11. 11 times. Most people consider themselves blessed if they eat here once. "Mr. Lebrant, please kindly name one dish you ate the last time you were here," Chef Julian says. However, Richard just stares at him because he can't answer. 11 times you take the boat out here, where we introduce every dish every single time. We tell you exactly what we're feeding you. Please tell me one dish you ate the last time that you were here, or the time before. Just one, please." Richard is still silent, so Anne whispers to him, "Cod." "Cod?" Richard says. "It wasn't cod, you donkey. It was fucking halibut, rare fucking spotted halibut." Anne asks why it even matters, and Chef Julian says, "It matters to the halibut and to the artist whose work turns to shit inside your gut." He goes on that his work has reached a price point where only the people in that room can afford it, and he's worked to satisfy people who can never be satisfied. Starting with her, he says, and turns to point at his mother, who has her head down looking at her table. Bryce says that this isn't just Chef Julian's restaurant, and the chef agrees, saying that Doug Varick is his angel investor who owns the island and the restaurant. If you remember, Doug is someone that the finance bros have continuously brought up. He's their boss, and again, that's why they thought they had so much privilege in the restaurant, because they know that their boss technically owns this restaurant. Chef Julian then says that Doug Varick kind of in a way owns him, but now things are more complicated and it's the other way around. Elsa then flips a switch in the kitchen and a spotlight goes on out in front of the window outside, pointing at Doug Varick, who is hanging from 2 cords attached to angel wings in the distance above the water, the same wings that Margot saw the workers with before. Doug appears to be fine, but the guests are still concerned. The 3 finance men stand up. Soren asks how to make this stop and what they can do to stop this. Their boss is literally hanging outside. Like, what is going on? Look, obviously we have money. Just say how much and we'll give it to you. Just say a fucking number, man, Dave yells. I don't need your money, Chef Julian replies. Dave tries to make a run for it past the guards, but the guards push him and he actually hits the hallway floor hard. He kept you open through COVID, you prick, Bryce yells, referring to Doug. Yes, he did, and he questioned my menu. He would even request substitutes despite the fact that there are no substitutions at Hawthorne. Chef Julian screams at Doug through the window. He then turns to Elsa. Fallen angel, please. She then motions with her arms like wings to someone outside. We can hear Doug yell out no several times. The guests just watch, unable to help Doug, who is slowly lowered into the water. The guests panic and some of them tear up, but Doug is now fully submerged in the dark water. Chef Julian asks them if they can hear the silence, and that the silence means that he's free. It's clear that Doug has drowned. Suddenly, the timer goes off. Margot's 15 minutes are up. Chef will now speak with you in his office, Elsa tells Margot. Chef Julian sits in his office at his desk. He looks down and has his hand on his forehead, kind of like he's going through like a mild day of stress, not like just 2 people have died and everyone else is going to die tonight. Then he hears a knock on his office door. Come in. Margot slowly enters and closes the door behind her. You've made the decision? I have, she says. And what have you decided? That you were right, I shouldn't be here. And I say this with respect because I'm sure that you're quite brilliant. But I mean, all of this isn't meant for me, Margot says, trying to remain calm. You're not sure I'm brilliant, so don't say it. It's false. Fine, I'm not sure that you're brilliant. Oh, I was expecting more, Chef Julian taunts. Fuck you, Margot says, sounding more stern. I guess I'm going to have to make your decision for you. You belong here with your own breed. And what breed is that? With the shit shovelers. You thought I couldn't tell? Oh, I know a fellow service industry worker when I see one. Mr. LeBrant, how do you know him? You've been eyeing him all evening. Referring to Richard, the old man. I think you know, she says. So he paid for an experience, and I can tell as one provider of an experience to another, you don't rattle easily, so how did he rattle you, Margot? She tries to deny being rattled by Richard, but then she admits it. He told me to agree with everything he said and to continue eye contact while he jerked off. Wow, specific. Not really. Pretty unoriginal. What rattled me is that he told me to tell him that he was a good man, that I was his daughter and that he loved me, and I loved him, and so he's a romantic, Chef Julian interrupts. He then says, I don't need the details. I know what a bad customer is. Do you enjoy providing services? Yes, or I used to. Do you enjoy providing yours? Margot asks. I used to. I haven't had the desire to cook for someone in ages, and one does miss the feeling. He stands up and says, Come with me. The two then enter the dining room. Chef Julian claps, saying that everyone is so down in this room, but it's time for their next course, and tells them to all come outside into the evening air. They all get up and follow Chef Julian outside. His mother, however, gets up and takes a bottle of wine from an ice bucket and returns to her seat. Outside, several chefs are already waiting for them. Nothing to be frightened of, Chef Julian says. Bryce then whispers to his 2 friends that maybe there's a spare boat they can use to escape. But Soren says, to do what? It kind of seems like he's already given up with the idea of escaping or surviving tonight. Lillian then whispers to Ted, we're going to die tonight. Yes, we are, he agrees. Chef Julian tells them that their next course will be presented by sous chef Catherine Keller. She walks and stands in front of them. Tyler is the only one who very lightly claps, again just unfazed by this entire situation. Catherine says good evening and then tells them that 3 years ago, Chef Julian tried to have with her. She refused him, and a week later he tried again, and she refused, but he didn't fire her. He just didn't speak to her or look at her for 8 months. But she says that he can't do that because he's the star. She says the next course is called Man's Folly. Chef Julian steps forward and Catherine turns to face him. She pulls out a pair of the same small scissors that were served with the tacos and stabs Chef Julian in the thigh. The guests all gasp. She doesn't remove the scissors, but then hugs Chef Julian, who hugs her back. He then tells her he's sorry and then removes the scissors. He turns to the guests and says, to our male diners, we now offer you the chance to escape. You'll be given a 45-second head start, at which point members of my staff will try to catch you. If they do, but before he can even finish telling the rules, Soren just takes off running. Okay, I guess the 45 seconds starts now. All of the other men then rush off with Richard slowly walking away, holding onto his hand. Well, all the men run off, but Tyler, of course. Chef Julian points to him and tells him, "You too, you go try to escape." And Tyler nods and walks off. Again, clearly, I don't get this man at all. He is not worried at all. Chef Julian leaves and sous chef Catherine walks up to the woman. They all look afraid of her, but she asks them to join her inside and they follow. Still outside, a server holding a timer looks at the chefs and puts his finger up, motioning for them to wait. 45 seconds later, he says, "Go," and the chefs take off running after the men. The screen then reads 6-course. Inside, we see the meal, which looks almost like foam with several small orange balls in it. The meal is served to the women who all sit at the same table, and they still say thank you to the servers for serving them. Anne pours herself more wine as they start to eat. Catherine, the chef, also sits at the table with them. "This is fantastic," Lillian says. She continues to positively analyze it. "There was a time where that would have been a lot to me, Miss Bloom," Catherine says. She pauses for a minute and then breaks down into tears. Anne looks at Lillian as if to say, what should we do? What do we say? How do we comfort her? And Lillian just kind of shrugs. Margot says in an over-exaggerated way. "So good," Felicity adds. The others just join in too. They're trying to compliment Catherine on her dish, hoping that this could probably save their lives. "This is so good," Lillian says. "Yeah, you're very talented," Felicity adds. Catherine thanks her. Meanwhile, outside, Soren and Bryce run as fast as they can, yelling at each other to not run next to each other. They're kind of in a situation of every man for himself. The chefs are not far behind them. Soren then finds a boat and tries to get it to work. Back inside, Anne looks at Margot. "So, my husband." Margot looks at Anne, unsure of what to say, but she finally just admits, "Yeah, I do." "Right," Anne says coolly and nods. She doesn't need further explanation than that. She knows that her husband hired her. Felicity changes the topic and looks at Catherine. "You can tell us, are we really dying tonight?" "It doesn't work if you live," Catherine replies. "What doesn't work?" Anne asks. "The menu." "Why not?" "Well, it needs an ending that ties everything together conceptually. Otherwise, it just tastes good and who cares?" Catherine explains. "I mean, really, you should have your own place, and I could help you with it," Lillian says, again trying to save herself. "I'm sure you could, Miss Bloom. We would just have to talk about the dying thing," she says, laughing. "Oh, everyone dying was my pitch, actually. I'm super proud of it," Catherine says. Lillian then just wipes her hands, giving up, and then grabs a wine bottle. "Anybody want wine? Fuck it," she says. And everyone else joins in drinking some wine as well. I mean, it's clear they were trying to suck up to Catherine to see if maybe she could save them. But now that Catherine admitted that this whole dying thing was her idea, they're fuck it, let's just accept our fate and drink some wine. Outside, the movie star Tom slowly walks, looking like he's in pain from running. He then stops. "I heard a pop," he says, holding his side. Suddenly, he's tackled by a chef. The two chefs that were following Richard slowly walk up to him. He doesn't even try to fight back, he's clearly accepted the defeat. Two chefs then carry Soren, who is yelling and flailing, out of the water. As for Ted, he hides in a chicken coop, but suddenly the coop door opens and a chef sticks his hand in and hands Ted dessert. A special bite for the last guest to be caught. Ted takes it. "Enjoy," they say. "Thank you," Ted replies. So clearly none of the men escaped. Back inside, Margot smokes a cigarette while sitting at the table with the women. "Not that you guys give a single flying fuck, but my name is not Margot. It's Erin, and I'm from Brockton, Massachusetts, so there's that," she says. The men are then all brought back into the dining room, and everyone returns to their original seats. Felicity asks Tom, "How did you do out there?" "Great, yeah, I killed it. I'm the only one that got away." "I'm sorry I'm such a fucking failure," he says. "It's okay," she tells him, and then admits, "I've been stealing money from you." "I know," he says. "Yeah, I know you know," she replies. "I wrote a negative recommendation for you to Sony." "I know, you CC'd me on it," she says. Chef Julian then interrupts them and speaks to them all, saying that they can't continue until they deal with an unresolved matter. "You," he says, and looks at Tyler. "Me?" Tyler says. Chef Julian then walks over to him. "Tell me why you're here." "Well, I wanted to experience your food, chef." "What were you told ahead of time?" "You told me it'd be the greatest menu you ever created." "Right, and that everyone would die," Tyler says. Margot's eyes widen as she hears this, and the other guests gasp. Chef Julian asks Tyler what happened to his original date, and Tyler says that she broke up with him, and he brought Margot because they don't offer seatings for one. "So you hired Margot knowing she'd die?" Chef Julian says. Yes, Tyler replies. As soon as Margot hears this, she just loses it and she jumps across the table. She punches Tyler in the face and screams at him. Servers quickly pull her off and they put her back in her seat. Tyler looks down, semi-ashamed. Chef Julian just stares at him. Can't blame her, can you? For the 8 months I corresponded with you, I gave you, Tyler, access to our world and I swore you to secrecy. Why do you think I did this? Well, you wanted me here because you said that I know a lot about food, Tyler says. That's right, you're not like the others, are you? Chef Julian says, and he lists all the knowledge that Tyler has pointed out throughout the night. Tyler looks happy about this. You're a cook and cooks belong in the kitchen. Isn't that right? Yes, chef, all the chefs say. Tyler can't believe what he's hearing. I mean, all night he's just been hoping to have Chef Julian's approval, and here it is. Chef Julian then leads him into the kitchen and gives him a chef's jacket. He puts it on, and Chef Julian writes Tyler on it and then tells Tyler to cook. Tyler tries to refuse, but Chef Julian insists. Elsa gathers all the guests to watch Tyler, who looks overwhelmed when a chef asks, like, what does he need? Like, what do you need? Do you need an ingredient? Do you need a utensil? Like, how can we help you? This is when Tyler decides to make leeks. Chef Julian asks him what else he needs, and Tyler stutters, obviously nervous as he chops up the leeks. He's definitely not a chef, yet all night he's been talking about how much he knows about food, how he actually knows the story behind this. So all night he's been trying to make it seem like he's this big foodie who knows his food, yet he doesn't even know how to cook in the kitchen. He's definitely not a chef. Tyler nervously fumbles around the kitchen trying to cook as Chef Julian asks what else he needs, like proteins and things like that. As Tyler chops and gets butter for his pan, we can see he is a complete amateur when it comes to actually cooking. He even burns his hand on the frying pan handle, forgetting that he needs protection for that. Tyler says that he thinks he's done. Are you sure? He says. In the next scene, we see Tyler's meal plated. It doesn't look like the others. The lamb looks undercooked and kind of dry, and the presentation of the plate is just terrible. Chef Julian takes a bite and analyzes the flavors in his mouth silently. Wow, it's actually quite bad. Tyler looks like he's about to cry. You are the reason mystery has been drained from our art. You see that now, don't you? Chef Julian says. Sorry, chef, Tyler quietly says. Come here, he says very softly. Tyler leans in and Chef Julian whispers something into his ear. Tyler's eyes fill up with tears. He takes a step back and takes off his apron. Tyler thanks him and then walks out of the kitchen through the back. Chef Julian then looks at Margot. Now you're free too. He then addresses the group and apologizes because what they just saw wasn't originally part of tonight's menu. He then tells Margot to come with him. She follows him into the kitchen as the others are told to return to their seats. Chef Julian, Elsa, and Margot stand in a hallway behind the kitchen. He tells Margot that dessert is about to be prepared, but that he requires a large barrel that Elsa forgot to get. So he tells Margot to go get it. Elsa thinks somebody else should get it, like someone else that works there. But Chef Julian says that Margot is now one of them. Elsa gives Margot the key to the smokehouse and she leaves to go and get the barrel. As she's on her way out, she sees Tyler's feet hanging. He's hung himself in Chef Julian's office. Like, this is crazy. Like, the fact that Tyler this entire time knew that they were all going to die, yet he willingly brought Margot and he willingly came himself, knowing that this would be his ending, is just crazy. Margot looks at this, she looks at Tyler, who is now dead, with like an air of justice, and then continues on with her mission. She walks outside with a flashlight and a bird screeches and it startles her, but she keeps going. Meanwhile, the guests sit at their tables silently worried. Chef Julian enters the dining room and is about to clap, but the movie star Tom jumps up and says, "Excuse me first." "I'm sorry, chef," he says, and Chef Julian puts his arms down. Tom nervously says that he doesn't think that this is fair. "Do you want to know why you're being punished?" Chef Julian asks. "Sure," Tom replies. "I saw the film Calling Dr. Sunshine and I didn't enjoy it." "I'm sorry?" Tom says, taken aback. "It was a Sunday, my one day off in months, the most precious day, the day where I was allowed to live, and I saw the film Calling Dr. Sunshine alone in the cinema." "Okay, but I didn't direct it, I just acted in it," Tom says. "The memory of your face in that film and seeing you again now haunts me. What happens to an artist when he loses his purpose? It's pitiful." "No, you're right," Tom agrees. "But what about her?" Tom says, pointing to Felicity. Chef Julian then looks at her. "What school did you go to?" "Brown," she says. "Student loans?" No. I'm sorry, you're dying, Chef Julian says. Felicity looks sad and scared, but she just gives a small nod as if she's saying, okay. Meanwhile, Margot walks around the smokehouse using her flashlight, and she finds a small knife and picks it up. Moments later, she walks towards a brick house or cottage. All of the lights are off inside of it, so she walks around. She goes to a side door and opens it, and it's unlocked. She walks into the house and turns on a light and sees an industrial kitchen. On the other side of the floor, she sees the bedroom. The lighting is modern and everything looks expensive. Mother, she says, noting the wealth that this cottage shows. Because remember, Chef Julian said that he and her are the same. That they are both from the working class. But now that she sees his cottage, sees how fancy his houses, she realizes that they're not the same. She then notices a silver door with the same design on it that the silver door has in the restaurant, and she walks up to it. She starts to open the door when she hears, "No one is allowed inside Chef's house." She turns and sees Elsa standing on the other side of the room. "Do you think you're special? You disobeyed this rule," Elsa says. Margot, forgetting about the door, takes a few steps towards Elsa, but stops when Elsa picks up a large knife from a table. She walks around towards Margot. "You've been a new one since you arrived," Elsa tells her. "I'm sorry, if you don't mind me asking though, why would you die for him?" "He will not replace me," Elsa says. "Replace you? Trust me, I have no—" Margot starts to say, but before she can finish her sentence, Elsa cuts her off by trying to cut her with a knife. Margot screams and just jumps back. Elsa tries to slash her knife at Margot 2 more times, but she ducks and avoids it and then runs into the kitchen. Margot tries to throw a frying pan at Elsa but misses. Elsa then comes for Margot again, but she rolls over an island counter. They continue fighting and Margot is able to hit Elsa in the leg, causing her to drop the knife. But she quickly picks it up again. Before she stands up, Margot is able to run into Elsa and pushes her against a table. Elsa struggles to turn around and push Margot against that same table so that she can stab her, but Margot holds Elsa's wrist with all her strength and pushes her to the ground. Margot then grabs an appliance from the counter, and when Elsa stands on her feet again, Margot throws it at Elsa, causing her to fall to the ground. Margot then jumps on top of Elsa, saying, "Stop, enough, why are they fighting like this?" The knife is still in Elsa's hand and she tries to stab Margot with it. "He didn't tell me about the barrel. I didn't forget," Elsa yells. Margot is able to turn the blade and then she stabs Elsa in the throat. Margot screams and jumps off Elsa, horrified as she bleeds out and dies. Then she gets up and returns to the silver door. She uses a key and opens it. She goes inside and turns a light on, revealing a sort of safe room with cement walls and minimal furniture. On the walls are framed old newspaper clippings about Chef Julian. There's also one family photo and one photo of Chef Julian and Doug Varick standing outside of the restaurant on Hawthorne Island. There's also a photo of teenage Chef Julian wearing a t-shirt and an apron flipping a hamburger. The plate on the photo reads, "Hamburger Howie's Employee of the Month, Julian Slowik." Now, Julian genuinely looks happy in this photo, which is a stark difference from the Chef Julian that we see now, who is very serious and never smiles. Margot then notices a radio and runs over to it. She fiddles with the dials and picks up the microphone. "Hello?" she asks into it. Meanwhile, back in the restaurant, Chef Julian walks into the dining room holding a birthday cake and singing "Happy Birthday" to Bryce with the other chefs. Chef Julian puts the cake down in front of him and Bryce turns to Soren. "You told him it was my birthday?" "Yeah, it seemed funny about 3 hours ago," Soren replies. "Thank you," Bryce says and blows out the candles. This moment is then interrupted by Margot, who rolls a barrel into the dining room. Chef Julian tells her to leave it there and to take her seat, which she does. Chef Julian sits across from her and tells her he wants her to understand that he is a monster, or he was a monster and a whore. But tonight, everything he's doing is pure egoless, and his pain is almost gone. There are 2 candles on the table between them, and he puts one of his hands over the candle and says, "Chef's hands," explaining that he can carry a cast iron from a hot oven to a table with no protection. He then puts out the flame with his fingers. "I can no longer be hurt, Margot," he says. He then quotes Martin Luther King and says that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Suddenly, there's a loud foghorn coming from a boat that is approaching the island. Everyone quickly turns and looks out the window, but Chef Julian just continues to stare at Margot. "I see you found our radio," he says to her, and she smiles. Chef Julian then jumps to his feet and tells the other chefs, "Clear the dining room immediately." The guests are quietly excited, thinking that they've been saved. A chef comes over to Bryce and cleans his face with a rag. Another puts the movie star's jacket back on him. They put Richard into a sling and tuck a napkin into Margot's dress. They're trying to fix the scene to make it look like nothing bad is happening here. Chef Julian quickly warns them, "You'll be tempted to ask for help, to plead even. This would be unwise. He cannot help you. Ask yourself two things. One, if you really want to be responsible for the death of an innocent man, and to ask yourself this entire evening, why didn't you all try harder to fight back? To get out of here? Honestly, you probably could have." Something to think about. The server walks the Coast Guard from the boat into the dining room. "Good evening, officer. How can we help you?" Chef Julian asks. "I got a report of a disturbance." All the guests just look at him and don't say anything. Chef Julian then tells the Coast Guard that they're in the middle of a dinner service, and the Coast Guard looks around and asks if anyone here called in a distress. No one says anything. Chef Julian then makes a joke that they don't serve the guests shortwave radios, and the cooks all laugh. All the guests just continue to silently stare at the Coast Guard like no one is speaking up and asking for help. The Coast Guard then looks at the movie star and recognizes him. Tom stands up and says, "Yes, that's me. I'm the movie star." Chef Julian then asks the Coast Guard if he wants Tom's signature, his autograph. The kitchen staff give him paper and a pen, and Tom signs an autograph to the Coast Guard, whose name is Dale. Dale tells Tom that he and his wife love the movie he did where he plays a surgeon. Calling Dr. Sunshine, he says while looking at Chef Julian. Tom then hands Dale the autograph, and Dale starts to exit the restaurant. He opens a note as he walks by Margot's table, and on the autograph is not Tom's signature. Instead, he wrote, "Help us." Dale slowly stops and turns around, pointing his gun. "Hands up, everyone, hands up. Everyone put their hands up." "Clearly, there's a misunderstanding," Chef Julian says. "Help us," Anne finally yells. The whole dining room erupts with the guests asking for help and standing and saying different things, so you can't actually make out what anyone is actually saying. Dale tells everyone to be quiet, and then they all point to Chef Julian. It's him, Anne says. Dale tells everyone to stop speaking. He tells Chef Julian to get on his knees and put his hands behind his head. Everyone in the dining room starts saying yes, 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 because they're just so relieved. Dale repeats for nobody to move, and then he slowly turns his gun in Margot's direction. Everyone freaks out, asking what he's doing, like you're pointing the gun at the wrong person. And then he points his gun to the candle that's gone out and ignites a flame at the end of his gun. It's not a real gun, it's just a lighter. Margot just stares in shock, and everyone else goes silent. "Thank you, Dale," a server says as Dale smiles and walks over to Chef Julian and helps him up. The guests are all still too stunned to speak. Dale takes his jacket off and then walks into the kitchen. "So in a kitchen, we all work together where nothing works at all. We work as a team," Chef Julian says. He then walks over to Margot, saying that she betrayed their sacred bond of trust. "I was wrong, you're not an eater, you're a taker, like all the rest." Margot tears up, realizing all hope is lost. Dale was in on it. He wasn't a real Coast Guard. He was part of the kitchen staff this entire time. "The final course will be coming out in 5, they all say. The guests all just silently sit at their tables while Chef Julian's mom takes another sip of her wine. The chefs start to prepare the dessert, and Margot looks ahead and she builds up some determination. She stands and faces the kitchen and claps. The chefs all turn and look at her. "I don't like your food and I would like to send it back," she says. All the chefs' heads turn and look at Chef Julian. "I'm sorry to hear that. What about my food is not to your liking?" "Well, for starters, you've taken the joy out of eating every dish that you serve. Tonight has been some intellectual exercise rather than something you just want to sit and enjoy. When I eat your food, it tastes like it was made with no love." "Oh, that is ridiculous. We always cook with love, don't we?" "Yes, chef," everyone replies. "Everyone knows love is the most important ingredient," Chef Julian adds. "Come on, chef. I thought tonight was a night of hard truths. One of them is that you cook with obsession, not love. Even your hot dishes are cold. You're a chef. Your single purpose on this earth is to serve people food that they might actually like, and you have failed. You failed, and you failed me, and the worst part is I'm still fucking hungry," Margot replies. Chef Julian looks dazed. "You're still hungry?" "Yes, I am." "How hungry?" "Starved." "Well, what are you hungry for? What do you have?" "Everything." "You know what I'd really like?" Margot says. "Tell me." "A cheeseburger," Margot replies. The expression on Chef Julian's face changes. There's almost a glimmer of excitement. We can do a cheeseburger. A real cheeseburger, not some fancy deconstructive Avon bullshit. A real cheeseburger, Margot says. Well, I'll make you a very good traditional cheeseburger. I don't think you can, she challenges him. I'll make you feel as if you're eating the first cheeseburger you ever ate. A cheap one your parents could barely afford. Show me, she says. How do you like it? Medium, American cheese. Chef Julian agrees, saying that American cheese is the best for a cheeseburger and says that the cost of this burger will be $9.95. Margot then asks if it comes with fries, crinkle cut or julienne. Chef Julian asks. We then see 2 meat patties being placed on the grill. Chef Julian adds onions to the patties and flips them. He then adds American cheese and he actually smiles while he cooks. The guests still sit at their seats in silence. Chef Julian then plates a cheeseburger, still smiling softly. He brings the burger and fries to Margot on a paper plate. She takes a bite and chews slowly. Chef Julian waits in happy anticipation for her reaction. Now that is a cheeseburger, she says. Yeah. That's a cheeseburger, Chef Julian replies. Unfortunately, I think my eyes were a little bigger than my stomach. Yeah, I understand. Can I get the rest to go? Margot asks. 1 moment, please, he replies. Moments pass and Chef Julian returns to Margot's table with a brown paper bag. 1 cheeseburger to go. And a gift bag, he says, also putting a fancier black bag on the table. Thank you for dining at Hawthorne, Chef Julian says. Margot looks nervous and quietly says, thank you, for everything, and she puts a $10 bill down on the table and stands up. Chef Julian looks at her with a smile on his face as Margot slowly steps back and then turns and starts to exit the restaurant. Before she does, she turns and looks at all the other guests who all just look at her except for Chef Julian's mother, who's laying her head down on the table, and Richard, who looks away from her. Anne looks at Margot and motions for her to go, to get out of here, to make it out of here. Margot turns and slowly walks down the hall and then exits the restaurant. Chef Julian tells the guests that before the final course, there's the matter of the bill. He says that they're on a no-tip system, so gratuity is included. He tells them to enjoy their gift bags and that there are some goodies in each of them. Each of the guests are then given the same gift bag that Margot got and the bill. The 3 men at their table each put down a card. Lillian goes to pay and Ted tells her, no. This one's on the magazine. Richard then holds a bill motioning that it's ready to be taken, and the movie star throws down a credit card down on his bill. Meanwhile, outside, Margot runs down to the dock. Chef Julian stands in front of the kitchen and tells the guests, once again, thank you for dining with us tonight. You represent the ruin of my art and my life, and now you get to be a part of it. Part of what I hope is my masterpiece. The chefs then sprinkle graham cracker crumbs on the floor and on all of the tables. They also put sauces on the tables. They then put marshmallow-like ponchos on each of the guests. They put chocolate hats on each of them. They're decorating the guests. And now our final dessert course is a playful twist on a comfort food classic, the s'more, the most offensive assault on the human palate ever contrived, Chef Julian says before explaining the way the ingredients are sourced. It's everything wrong with us, and yet we associate it with innocence, with childhood, with mom and dad. He continues his ominous speech as Margot runs up to a small boat and gets on. She turns on a light on the boat and goes to the steering wheel. The guests all just stare and listen to Chef Julian accepting their fates. Purifying flame, it nourishes us, it warms us, reinvents us, forages and destroys us. We must embrace the flame, Chef Julian says. Margot struggles with the boat's controls trying to get it to turn on, but eventually it works and she drives the boat out of the dock. Meanwhile, Chef Julian reaches his hand into a fire that is in the bottom of an oven and grabs a handful of coals. We must be cleansed, he says, walking into the dining room. He stands in the middle of the dining room and says, I love you all. We love you, Chef. The chefs and even the guests respond. Chef Julian then drops one of the coals in front of him and it lands on the design on the floor, igniting it with flames. The flames quickly cover Chef Julian and they grow outward on the floor. The chocolate starts to melt down the guests' faces from the heat, and the other chefs turn on all the burners. Meanwhile, Margot's boat is safely out in the water, and she continues on her journey to freedom. She steps away from the wheel and just sits at the front of the boat, just taking everything in. She then hears a distant explosion. She turns to see that the restaurant has exploded into flames. She pulls out her doggy bag and takes a bite of her burger as she watches the flame. From the gift bag, she takes out tonight's menu, looks at it, and uses it as a napkin and wipes her mouth. Margot then takes another bite of the delicious cheeseburger. Okay, that movie was wild. And to end this video, look what I got. I ended up going to get a cheeseburger right now with my husband. I was like, listen, I have to do it for work. Normally, I'm not like a burger person, I will say. Like, it's never like my first pick. Usually, if I'm gonna get takeout or something like that, I prefer like pizza or wings or like, like Mediterranean bowls, like stuff like that. Burgers are never my first choice, but when I do have a burger, I enjoy it so much. And look at this. We got a nice cheeseburger from In-N-Out. So let's take a bite together. It's probably a little cold because I got this like an hour ago, but it'll be fine. Let's take a bite. Just like how Margot does it in the movie. That is a damn good burger. The cheeseburger in the movie just looks so good. There's actually this restaurant in Los Angeles called, well, it's probably like everywhere, Irv's Burgers. When the movie came out, they actually came out with a menu cheeseburger. I drove all the way there just to get it because I was like, dude, that burger looked unreal, and it was unreal. It was so, so good. I mean, sometimes you just need like a classic cheeseburger. But anyways, that is the movie, The Menu. I absolutely loved it. At first, I thought that maybe they were going to get away with it. Like maybe he was going to change his mind at the end. But then I was like, nah, it's not going to happen. Like he's not changing his mind. Then I thought that maybe him and Margot would leave together and they would just kind of like kill all the bad people and the spoiled people, and them two would just like go off on their own. So yeah, I thought it was interesting that he was willing to take himself and take his own mom as well. It is kind of crazy how all the guests just accepted their fate. They didn't even fight back. Like, it's actually crazy because, I mean, yeah, there was a gun. I don't know what happened to the gun after Jeremy shot himself, but still, like, the guests could have all rallied together and honestly fought back and, like, did their best to escape. So it's kind of crazy how they just kind of accepted their fate. Now, there are theories as to why that is. And one states that because they're all so privileged, they've never experienced discomfort, so they actually don't know how to react in that situation. There's also a lot of debate about Margot being let go and why that was. Some people have a theory that because she gave him that joy in his craft again with the cheeseburger, he was like, okay, like maybe like this can also happen for you. Like you go, you live, you go try to find your joy in your craft again. Because remember, they both had that moment where they said they once loved what they did and now they don't. To me, that theory kind of makes the most sense. I don't think she like outsmarted him or like tricked him or something. Her job as a worker involves making people happy, and she just knows how to do that. So that's what she did. She made the chef happy. Overall, I just really enjoyed this movie. It was so good. I can see why it's so popular. I just love all of the comedy in it. Like all of the jokes just worked so well. And I really recommend that you watch the movie so you can experience the jokes and the comedic timing. I loved the food critics so much. Like Ted and Lillian were like my favorite just because they're so pretentious, and it was just fun watching them kind of just say BS. Like, who knows what the heck they were saying? Like, sometimes I feel like food critics can be a little bit over the top, and like, I don't really take them too seriously. Like, I'd rather just read Google reviews and call it a day. They were definitely my favorite characters. I even kind of liked Tyler's character, even though he was literally the worst. There still was something funny about him and kind of likable. Just the fact that he literally did not give a crap was kind of funny. I mean, all the characters are supposed to be insufferable, and I guess they are all technically bad people, but they're just so fun to watch. Like, I really enjoyed the characters, even the annoying finance bros. It was just a really amazing movie. I liked the message behind it. I liked just the idea of it. Like, it just felt so original, and I've watched it so many times, and now I'm probably gonna watch it again tomorrow because it's just such a good comfort movie. I would love to know what you guys thought about this movie down below. What did you guys think was going to happen? What did you think about the message behind the movie? Did it make sense? Did it not? I would just love to know your guys' reactions to this movie. If you haven't seen my last video on the movie Trap, you guys can click on it on the upcoming screen to watch it. That movie is also just so good, so funny, so you'll definitely have a good time with that one. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say for today's video. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope you guys had such a fun time talking about the movie The Menu. I know I did. Now I'm going to go enjoy this nice burger that I'm probably going to warm up. Let's take one final bite for the video. Absolutely delicious. Thank you guys again so much for being here, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.